One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest has, in my opinion, trivialized the moment McMurphy is reduced to a symbol of resistance. He is not ideologically opposed to the system. He has no program, no manifesto, nor does he even have a consistent desire to overthrow it. He reacts as a human being in an inhumane context. The film does not ask McMurphy to be a desirable human being, nor does it ask us to identify with him because he's good, but because he is alive. He is unpleasant, impulsive, sexist. He often thinks of himself first. And the film does not hide this. Nor does it hide his altruistic sides, and that is why his no to the system carries weight. Because saying no from the position of an imperfect person, without moral superiority, without ideology, without certainty that you're right, that is courage. It is not a rebellious pose, nor the opposition of some psychopathic killer. That would be far too easy. When Mac arrives at the hospital, it's as if all his wishes have come true. His wishes are confirmed by the seemingly pleasant treatment. This is the scene when Washington wakes Bancini and asks him, "How is he?" He answers with, "Rested." It is the first and only time in the film that he ever says he's rested. Otherwise, he constantly yells that he is tired. That's what he is kinda known for. Right at the beginning of the film, Nurse Ratched leads physical exercises with patients, nothing unusual. On her right hand, there's a key attached, a set of keys, which jingle and which actually bother her while she is performing the exercises. Only when the exercises are finished does she remove the keys and sets them aside. That is the moment when everything seems calm and fine still. Is that a hint at the inversion of the so-called idyllic atmosphere that follows? Into that apparent idyllic atmosphere, where several members of the head nurse staff ask the patients how they are, and where everything looks as if the system serves the individual, Mac comes to the doctor for an interview. There, we already discover that this will be a film about systems and about how people are their extensions or their opponents. Systems are not particularly concerned with what people are like. On the contrary, they are usually circular and serve themselves. Because, for example, when Mac is convicted of a sexual offense, why did the defense not offer that he was insane or something similar? Why was he not evaluated by anyone in prison? Only when he pretends to be mentally ill in order to get out of prison is he sent for evaluation. Why did he end up in prison? On paper it says, as the doctor reads to him, "You have at least 5 arrests for fighting." Rocky Marciano is 40 years old and a millionaire, says Mac, daring to contextualize institutional axioms. Why was Mac sent to the hospital? It says he was belligerent, that he spoke when he was not allowed to, that he resisted work habits. He listens to this from the doctor's mouth and says, "Chewing gum in class?" This is the rejection of infantilization, because it is not as if he stabbed someone in the neck. As soon as Mac arrives at the hospital, he disrupts the hierarchical order of the institution with his charm. The scene in which the card game is interrupted because some people get up from the table and follow him is symbolic. Here it is already hinted what role he will have in the film, while others want to stick to routine. Harding is particularly interesting, serving as the healthiest extension of the institution, although formally he is not a part of it. Control, correction, and instruction characteristic of the system are already present here. At the first therapy session, everyone de facto introduces themselves to the viewers. Although it is difficult to share one's problems in a group therapy setting, fear is nevertheless felt. Fear of those who are allowed and who are capable of participating. After Harding complains about a problem with his wife, and after everyone refuses even to verbalize their reluctance to participate in the meeting, Nurse Ratched suggests that maybe the problem is with him, without any insight whatsoever. That his wife behaves promiscuously and dresses provocatively because he does not give her enough. Chaos ensues after that, but this does not stop her from saying, at the next therapy session, that the discussion of Harding's problems went very well, even though she practically blamed him for the state of his marriage, and even though after that there was a complete breakdown among the patients. Nurse Ratched sees that Mac succeeds at what she cannot, does not know how, and does not want to do, connecting with others. Yes, he sometimes does it for selfish reasons, but that does not bother her for moral reasons. It bothers her because it's not institutional, because it takes control away from her. The system may not be aware of her private pathology, but it allows it. As they later say, she is the best nurse they have. She is a product of an orderly, rigid, robotic system, which institutions by definition are. And her pathology, which deviates from what we perceive as the real job of a psychiatric nurse, help, understanding, empathy, the well-being of patients, is welcome in such a system. The system may not promote private pathology, but the fact is that it fits so perfectly into everything speaks in its favor. So asking whether she was doing her job for real makes no sense. Yes, she was doing exactly her job. Because her job is not what we think it is and what we would like it to be. If she had been a good nurse who tried to fight institutional injustices, she would have been treated like Mac. Her excuses, lies, not changing the schedule because of the game, the so-called benign offer that Mac, if he does not want to take the medication orally, can take it some other way, as well as the fact that Mac merely asks what it is in the pill they're trying to give him, which must never be done in institutions, further confirms all this. Doubt is forbidden. Her mechanisms of control are fully aligned with institutional mechanisms. She uses the patients to prevent watching the game and then allows voting while knowing in advance that it will not succeed because she has decided that one more vote from those who are not capable of participating in the discussion is needed. Some of the patients don't even know where they are, and this is clearly visible, and Nurse Ratched knows this. This is why she repeatedly allows voting, because she knows the game is unfair. Despite this, Mac creates a touching fake viewing of the game on a turned-off television, and everyone has fun. This does not please her, and before telling them over the microphone to stop immediately, she gives them a sharp, horrible look. Because it is not therapeutic to socialize with others, even though later, at therapy itself, she said that a person should be in the company of others and not alone. When one takes into account that everything must be under her control, there is no hypocrisy here. The others, alongside Mac, gradually allow themselves affection and even courage, each in their own way, in accordance with their problems, ages, interests, and so on. The last to accept this is Harding. He is fascinating because he is not a victim of naivete, but of conscious repression. Intelligent, eloquent, analytical, and precisely because of that, the most dangerous to himself. He sees the cracks, but verbally patches them up. His resistance to Murphy is not moral, but defensive. McMurphy threatens the construction in which Harding can survive by maintaining a reasonable and superior and a reasonable patient. Harding rationalizes the system because it allows him to repress his own vulnerability, anger, and powerlessness. His eloquence is not a sign of freedom, but a sophisticated self-defense mechanism. Repressive systems do not survive because everyone is forced, but because some intelligent people become their best lawyers, not necessarily out of malice, but out of fear of collapse. McMurphy is a threat because he does not offer an alternative system, but a crack. And the crack means you have to feel what you have suppressed. This is why Harding resists him the most. Not Ratched. Ratched is predictable. McMurphy is destabilizing. This becomes even more frightening when Mac realizes that some patients there are not even under coercion. They can leave whenever they want. The system does not have to intervene constantly because the patients carry the system within themselves. They monitor, restrain, and correct one another. Fear is the basic affect, but the key is the mixture of fear and apparent safety. Most of them are not locked up, they can leave. And it is precisely here that the film becomes brutal. Freedom exists formally, but is psychologically disabled. It is a freedom as ideology. You're not forced, you choose, but you choose within a framework that has already structured your desires, fear, and perceptions of risk. The system does not say you must leave, but if you leave, the consequences are your responsibility. And that's what's paralyzing. McMurphy's courage, therefore, appears almost erotic, not in a sexual sense, but as the attraction of a free act. They feel it, they admire it, but it is unbearable to them because it exposes the price of their adaptation. Those who repress the most will resist the most, because acknowledging McMurphy's freedom would mean acknowledging their own cowardice, not moral necessarily, but existential. Mac later talks to the doctors, who are unable to see Nurse Ratched's pathology and do not believe Mac when he says that she is not good, because he is a criminal, a patient, lower on the totem pole. This is another characteristic of the system, the belittling and infantilization of patients. Mac has no education. He does many things for selfish reasons, but he also does other things to cheer people up, to give them a good time, although against the rules and probably illegal, to make them laugh, teach them something, and so on. Mac is a prototype of a human being, not a saint, not a perfect victim, but a human with his flaws and virtues. And only with such existence do institutions become scarier than they already are. Because institutions do not punish rebels without reason. They punish the human being. Mac is the prototype of the human being, just as Nurse Ratched is the prototype of the institution. When we understand that, institutional behavior becomes even more grotesque and further removed from humanity, and this, paradoxically, in an institution whose task is the care of patients. Distance from humanity is a small step toward enjoyment in inhumanity. This is seen in numerous situations with patients with whom Nurse Ratched communicates, literally with everyone. The most prominent examples are Mac and Billy, whose suicide she causes. When Mac, after electroshock therapy, pretends to be lobotomized, She watches the scene with satisfaction, rubbing her nose, probably to partially cover her face, convinced that she has eliminated the competition. The relationship between Chief and Mac is interesting. His deception is a shield against ending up like his father, who was like Mac, a man who rebelled against the system because the system does not like individuals, but numbers. Chief, while silent, observes Mac and slowly gains trust in him, without Mac being aware of it. He knows exactly what Mac is and what the institution is. This is why he is freed in the end. But in the tradition of old poetics, someone must die, and who else in this context but Mac? And that in an act of mercy by the chief, because the hospital de facto killed him. It did not cause him to stop breathing, but turned him from a person into a patient. That is why the chief, who alone fully understands him, without speaking a single word for almost the entire film, gives him the only dignity a person can receive in that situation: death. Mac could have escaped. The door was open, for a while at least. Rose was calling him, and so was Candy, from the outside. But he hears a scream and goes to see what happened to Billy. McMurphy would be a problematic type, sometimes irresponsible, sometimes egotistical, sometimes a charming manipulator. But in that context, he becomes the only one who behaves humanly. Not because he is morally perfect, but because he does not renounce a spontaneous response to another's suffering. He goes to see what happened because he cannot not go. And here it is seen that he is not a selfish bastard, but he is not a saint either. He is someone who cannot switch off responsibility for another, even when it would save his life. Billy's death is not an abstract, tragic consequence of the system. It is a concrete consequence of cold moral blackmail, and McMurphy feels it instinctively. His strangling of Nurse Ratched is proof of that. The right, the moral against the wrong and the immoral, and the morality that needs no explanation, stamp, or academic paper. His death is a direct consequence of his humanity towards another human being, and the chief's act is the only possible form of dignity in that situation. Courage here is not in revolution, but in the inability to stop being human, even when it would be useful to you. Final words. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest does not work because it exposes a deviant space, but because it exposes a space that is trusted. Psychiatry in the film would have no power at all if it were perceived in advance as suspicious, violent, or evil. Quite the opposite. It is advertised as a place of help, rationality, knowledge, and care. As an authority one turns to when everything and everyone else fails. If it were an obviously bad place, the film would be trivial. It would not tear away a veil, but confirm a prejudice. What the film does is reveal the fact that the same patterns of repression we expect from prisons, courts, police, or openly authoritarian structures appear precisely where we expect the opposite, in a space of care. And that is the moment when another layer of illusion collapses. The shock is not that repression exists. The shock is where it exists. Psychiatry is not shown as an exception, but as an institution that functions perfectly precisely because it has moral credit. That is why it can infantilize, discipline, and break people and call it therapy. That is why Nurse Ratched is so dangerous. Not because she's brutal, but because she's reasonable. The film does not say psychiatry is bad, but something much more dangerous. Psychiatry is exactly what it must be for society to be able to believe it is humane. And once you see that, you can no longer look at institutions or your own experience with the same eyes.